Do you ever find yourself trying to get your partner on board, trying to get them to make a decision, be more involved, help out a little bit more? And they do make commitments, yet never seem to follow through on them.
Or maybe you're the partner who seems to have to analyze their partner all the time. Before you can even say anything or bring anything up, or when they have something to say, you're constantly analyzing their mood, their behavior, the situation to see, well, is it even safe for me to talk right now?
Yeah. And so today we're talking about part two in our four-part series, which is the different dances that we see in relationship that are dysfunctional. And we've called this one the walking on eggshells dance, right? This is a very classic one. It's between one partner who tends to lean a little more controlling, right? And I know a lot of people hate that word. I hate that word too. But the reality is that these people tend to try to engage things. They're the ones that are always, in pursuit, moving forward, trying to set up the scenario so that they can get what they want. And the other, which is the people pleaser, right?
Yeah. And the people pleaser tends to analyze situations, make sure that everyone around them is comfortable. They hardly think about themselves, they mostly think about others. The only thing they think about inside is, how can I be most comfortable in this situation right now? And it is dreadfully painful for the people pleaser to have other people around them feeling uncomfortable and not feeling good.
Yeah. So welcome back to the Evolved Marriage Podcast. My name's Eric. This is my wife, Kate.
Hello.
Today we're talking about these two stances, what they are as individuals, essentially the controller and the people pleaser. So you might find yourself in that, how they work together to create this really dysfunctional dance, and then what you can actually do to make sure that if you are stuck, you can kind of overcome this and feel connected again so that your
Hmm.
marriage can feel, passionate, exciting, and pleasurable again. And so the first thing I want to say is this idea around the controller. Now, a lot of people hate that word, and I get it, right? I tend to lead controlling. That's kind of my adaptation. A lot of people who typically are more anxiously attached fall into this idea of being controlling,
Hmm.
right? It's not always loud. Sometimes it can be a look. Sometimes it can be just, always being the one to engage, to go first, etc. But essentially, this person has their emotional state define the temperature of the relationship. And so this happened a lot in our relationship. When I was angry, it's something we both had to deal with. When I was
Yes.
sad, we both had to deal with it, right? My emotions were what was directing and guiding where our relationship was going. So, I would assume that a lot of times you're like, "Oh, I want to do this thing. How's Eric going to feel about that?"
Hmm.
Right. And so that essentially, if you're with a partner like this, you're always going to be thinking about how are they going to react to me making choices because their emotions kind of dictate the temperature of the relationship, whether
Hmm.
there's going to be distance or closeness, etc. And oftentimes this person is not even aware that this is happening, right? Because essentially they've been around people their whole lives that kind of allow them to just control. And when they don't feel in control, they just remove those people from their life, right? That's
Right.
what I did for a long time. It's like, oh, I can't control you. Get out of my face. I'm going to go be with other people that I think I can control because it feels so safe to me. And so a lot of times what happens in this narrative, for me, when I used to do this, I was trying to create safety, right? I was trying to, it's not, it looks like dominance sometimes. Sometimes I was trying to dominate, but even when I wasn't, I was trying to create safety for myself so that people wouldn't leave me, wouldn't create distance, right? Because that was the
Mhm.
scariest thing for me. It's the scariest thing for a lot of controllers is to have distance in a relationship or feel powerless to create change. And so that's a lot of what I was going through, way back when. And a lot of my adaptations came from this place because I am a controller in relationship. Now, what does the people pleaser typically do, right?
I am most definitely the people pleaser in the relationship.
Yeah.
That's probably the major dance that or stance that I take in our dance
And before we
is.
jump into that, I just want to say because, last week you said you were the avoider, and oftentimes what happens is like we can play these two stances. So for me, I'm very much controlling, but then when I can't control a situation, as you heard, I remove people out of my life, I avoid,
Yeah.
right? So whenever I feel out of control, my responses are to try to control, and when I can't, I avoid. And for you, it's similar to like,
Yeah, so I will usually tend to people please first. My adaptation is, I'm going to people please. I'm going to try to make everyone around me happy, no matter what impact that has on myself, on my relationship, on other people. I'm going to people please. When I feel like I'm failing at that, then I avoid, then
mhm.
I retreat, then I remove myself. You can go back and forth, but you tend to have one that's a little more dominant, and this one would be it for me. So a people pleaser, they please. They want you to be happy no matter what. So they'll agree when they don't actually agree. They'll soften truths. They'll say, I'm fine when they're not, clearly not.
Mhm.
And that happens a lot in our relationship. Eric will say, how are you feeling? And I'm like, oh, I'm good. And he's like, okay, how are you really feeling? Because I can't lie to him anymore. We've been together for too long. He can see right through me. And that feels very unsafe for a people pleaser because I would rather be invisible. I would rather people not know what's truly going on inside because by seeing my imperfections, they might see that, I'm not truly who I am, and that might make them feel uncomfortable. And that's the last thing I want is for somebody to feel uncomfortable because of something that I did.
Yeah, because to you, as you're saying that, a lot of people can relate to this. They're like, well, it's like, well, I don't want people to feel uncomfortable. Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah.
It's actually that you, in those moments, if you're a people pleaser, you actually manage your own anxiousness by trying to get everyone to be happy with you.
Mhm.
And so it's actually quite unhealthy because what happens is you're not giving people permission to be themselves, and you're constantly kind of editing yourself, hiding yourself in order to try to get the best response from people, which means that it's very hard to be in genuine relationship with a people pleaser,
Yeah, and
right?
oftentimes we'll say, they wear different masks. People pleasers will have different masks for different people, for different life situations. So it's very hard to have an intimate relationship with a people pleaser because they tend to always kind of either be invisible or be somebody different everywhere you go. There's been many situations in our relationship where, I'm one way at home and then a few hours later, I go somewhere and I'm wearing a mask, and Eric is like, wow, where was this version of you when we were alone at home? Like, it was so nice to see that energy and that beautiful life energy. Like, why don't you bring this at home? And it's like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this pretend all the time. Like, so the people pleaser is mostly driven by fear.
Mhm.
I'm afraid of people's reactions. I'm afraid of conflict. I'm afraid of the fallout. I'm afraid that if I don't show up perfectly all the time, that something will happen and it will be the demise of this relationship.
Yeah, and I wanna say, like, it's not passive at all, right? Like, I see this a lot. Like, the trend that I see is people who are people pleasers in a relationship end up totally burnt out,
Hmm.
totally disengaged, totally isolated, try not to talk to anybody anymore because it has become so exhausting for them to be around others. They need to be hyper vigilant to always try to guess what everybody's thinking and feeling, to always edit themselves. And so, it starts out in the beginning like, okay, I can do this, right?
Hmm.
I can kind of keep up to that. But eventually, what happens is they get so exhausted by trying to live this hyper vigilant lifestyle where they're staying 10 steps ahead of everybody, have an answer to everything, that they burn themselves out. And then what happens to that individual is, they stay in bed or their room a lot. They avoid everybody. They're constantly on social media. They're constantly trying to just numb out. The end of the day, they're totally exhausted. They have no energy for anyone. And I've even seen this where it's like, I remember in the past you used to say this, right? Which is like, I'm totally burnt out and I didn't do anything. And it's like, no, it didn't look like you were doing anything, but you spend so much time and energy in your head analyzing
Analyzing,
everything.
yeah,
You're just
everyone.
exhausted, right?
Hmm.
And so if you have a partner like this, and you're constantly, why are they always on their phone? Why are they always trying to go to bed early? Why are they always saying they're tired? It's probably because when they're putting themselves out in the world, they're trying to figure out what mask they need to wear, what they need to do, how they need to be seen, because to them, their worst fear is to be seen as lesser than, not good enough, failing, etc.
And what happens is, as people pleasers, you tend to isolate a lot. You tend to say, like, oh, I can deal with this on my own. So Eric will come to me with a grievance, and I'll be like, okay, I heard it. I'm listening. I got it. And then I'll go on my own and just like try on different masks. Like, is this one working? No. This one working? No. This one working? And then you kind of, exactly like you said, completely run out of energy. And so the controller what happens in relationship dynamics like this is the good controller will try to get something across, a message across, say something. And what happens is the people pleaser, who's already most likely exhausted, kind of runs out of roads, kind of doesn't know what to do anymore. And so they just like keep trying to please and keep trying to please. And then they can even get angry with themselves and isolate and retreat because it just becomes so exhausting to continuously hear the same complaint, to continuously hear the same reaction, negative reaction to something that you're so trying hard to do. But the people pleaser isn't very good at hearing other people out and really understanding where they're coming from. They're just like, fix it at all costs. Like, I don't want to hear anymore. I just need to fix this as soon as possible so that you stop feeling uncomfortable. And so then only when you stop feeling uncomfortable can I start feeling more comfortable.
Yeah, and, I've worked with a lot of, like, they call them, like, nice guys or whatever. Dr. Clever kinda wrote the book on that and created this code around it, and so I've seen a lot of men like this, and typically what happens long term, and, I think you've experienced this, in the past as well, but it's like, because what happens is the masks that you're trying to constantly wear to fix other people's opinions of you and try to get them to like you, when that doesn't work long term, especially in an intimate relationship, like you said, you kinda run out of road. Like, what a great term, right? Which is like, "Oh, none of these masks work." These people, they are so disconnected to themselves. Like, they don't know what they want, they don't know what they like, they don't, because they haven't been living for themselves forever,
Mhm.
right? And so now what's happening is your partner is saying, "Hey, I want to be with you." This is something we've had in our marriage where I'm like, "I wanna be with you. I wanna know what you like. I wanna know what you wanna do." And Kate was so disconnected to that version of her because she spent so much time trying to think about what everybody else wanted all the time and placating them and giving them that, she had lost that side of herself. And in those moments, if you're the people pleaser, you have an opportunity to grow, or you can, it's sad to say this, but you can exit the relationship. And that's kind of what you're saying, where like after a while, these people who get burnt out by people pleasing and they don't know how to reinvent themselves, they don't know how to say, you know what? I am going to say what I want, and I am going to choose to live life on my terms. And I am going to say, I like this and I want more of this. Some people are unwilling to kind of, heal those wounds and
Mm.
start to stand up for themselves and accept that their partner actually loves them for who they are and all that stuff, that they just don't want to be in a relationship anymore. And I've seen so many relationships end like this, where it's like, I want to keep up this mirage of like the masks that I'm wearing. And because you can see behind my mask, I don't like being with you anymore.
Yeah, this is
Right?
too uncomfortable. And I have broken relationships before because people have seen my mask, have been able to take off my mask. And that feels very threatening because I'm like, well, how can I hide who I am? And what if I make mistakes? And so ending those relationships is the safest thing. And I'm talking about like relationships with friends, coworkers, coaches, therapists.
Yeah. And I think for me, like as a controller, right, in these situations, a lot of my growth has been to accept the impact that my energy and my mood has on people, right?
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people, especially if like you're kind of a little more grandiose like me, right, as your adaptation, you're like, oh, people need to grow, people need to change. That's not my problem, it's their problem. Like that was a lot of where I used to fall into. I need to be aware that, it's important for me to be in collaboration with others, and in order to understand that, I need to accept that my choices have impact on others. I've seen so many people in this stance, just like me, say, "Well, that's not my problem, it's your problem. Like, you need to learn how to deal with my mood. You need to learn how to deal with my anger. You
Mhm.
need to."
It's just how I am.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly, and that's not my fault, that's your work to do. And that's not collaborative, right? That's very much like, "You're over there, and until you do what I need you to do to be with me, too bad for you." And so I had to accept that, like, the way that I was showing up was not only having a massive impact on you and our relationship, it's having an impact on my kids, it's having an impact on my friends, it's having an impact on everybody. And until I could start to really, essentially come down from my high horse and be honest that my choices impact all these people that I love in sometimes a way that feels very heavy for them, right? Where you're left to manage my anger, where you're left to manage these things. Until I was able to really do that, I couldn't create change. And so for a lot of times in these moments, if you're the controller, you have to be aware and honest with yourself. And this is where I find that being around other men, being around other people who can confront me is really important because you have to learn to be brutally honest with yourself, where it's you are also part of this. It's not just your partner's people pleasing tendencies that are the problem. It's actually you and your energy and your like constant need to say you need to do better and you need to do different and this needs to improve. And that is also causing that distance in that dynamic.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely part of your control that has kind of kept me a little bit blocked when it comes to continuing to be a people pleaser.
Mhm,
Your emotions and your, you know, attitude is kind of like I can't predict it. I just have to like find different ways to please you and I have to make sure that I try on all these different masks. And
mhm.
so especially before when we were at a much unhealthier place in our relationship. And you would say, like, just be yourself. Just tell me what you want to do. Why aren't you planning anything? I want you to plan things so that I can feel better and be closer to you. And I feel like you don't care about this relationship. Not that I didn't care. It's that I didn't know if I would plan something, if it was the right thing, what reaction I would get. And like, are you going to yell at me? Are you going to be aggressive, abusive? Like, I don't know.
Disappointed,
That's it.
judgmental, and I think, I really wanna slow this down here because this is important. You were scared,
Definitely.
and I think it's, a lot of times when we say that, we're like, "Well, like, my partner's not scared, like, I never hit her, I never, like, whatever," right? Like, but there's still fear there,
Yeah,
and
and
you have to be able to
especially
own that.
yeah, and especially that, we all come into our relationships with baggage already from our childhood. So what was happening in our relationship is I came in with baggage already being a slight people pleaser. And then by having Eric's emotions be so unpredictable for so long, it made my vigilance for other people's emotions that much higher. And it heightened my awareness for any kind of like you know, thing that I might be doing wrong in the relationship because God forbid I made Eric angry. And then when we had kids, that heightened even more because now I didn't only have to protect myself, but I had to protect my kids from, bad attitudes and aggression and whatever else came with, the issues that you were having back then. So it's not to say that my people pleasing is necessarily your fault. It's more to say until there is safety in the relationship, it's very hard for the people pleaser to kind of be able to find themselves. And until there's safety in the relationship, it's hard for the controller to trust the people pleaser, to trust that the people pleaser can actually be themselves and show up authentically in the relationship.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to say, right, like, first of all, the people pleasing skill, even in the sense the controlling skill is like an adaptation in
Absolutely.
order to try to, close the distance in a relationship, try to stay connected. But the other thing too that I think is important to say is that, um, this idea of safety, it's not just the, controller's responsibility. What needs to happen is awareness needs to happen and responsibility needs to happen on the controller's part to accept that their mood is having an impact and it impacts, in this case, that I impact Kate. And, as the people pleaser, they have a responsibility as well to courage, right? You can't just like wait. This is the problem I see a lot of relationships where it's like somebody's like, "Oh, well, I didn't feel safe in the moment." Well, it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, but you're like stuck in your head, still making up all these stories, and like you're never gonna feel safe until you do something, and then safety happens.
Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
courage needs to happen from the people pleaser to be like, I'm going to try to express what I want. I'm going to do this scary thing of opening up or saying, hey, that's not okay. I don't appreciate the way you spoke to me there. Right. And so it takes the people pleaser some courage to step into that because I've seen so many people in this stance say, well, I don't feel safe. So until I feel safe, I'm not doing it. Well, it's like, okay, well, you're never going to feel safe until you do something and it turns out okay. So you have to be able to choose that. And I think that's the clunky thing that needs to happen in order to change is if you're the controller, your one move here is to be really honest about and I think honestly, like, having people around you that can tell you the truth
That
about
can
how
hold
your
you
behavior yeah,
accountable.
your behavior
Mhm.
affects them. I remember when I started men's work, right, I was in this group and I was, like, complaining about this situation, and I had a guy, he was, like, an elder, he was, like, in his late 60s, and he stopped me. And he says, "Hey, I just want you to know that the way you're treating your wife is mean. It's cold-hearted. You should not speak to your wife that way." And my response, of course, was like, "Yeah, but you don't get it, blah, 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 blah." He said, "I don't care what your wife's doing. What you're telling me about how you're acting, that's unacceptable for a husband to do." And I was, like, so angry with that guy. I remember getting off the call. I was so angry, but I sat with that, right? And that was kind of the start of accepting the
Yes.
truth,
Yeah.
which I was confronted by it. So if you're the controller, surround yourself by people who are willing to tell you the truth out of respect, out of love, and can help you grow so they can bring awareness to how your choices are impacting the people around you.
Yeah, and I think when you're not in a fight as the controller, it also is nice to have kind of like some feedback from your partner. Like, hey, when I'm starting to make you feel uncomfortable, can you please tell me? Because I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. But I know I sometimes tend to get into these situations where I might get there. So can you like just give me a little like wave when I am feeling making you feel uncomfortable? Just
Mhm.
having those like check-ins and asking, what moments those happen
Yeah,
when
like,
you're
"Help me
outside
out."
of a fight. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
exactly. To having those conversations, honest conversations with your partner. And as the people pleaser, just like you said, it's taking that first step towards courage and doing it outside a fight, doing it out when it feels safe. Maybe it means just asking for something, one thing you want per day. Maybe it's asking or expressing an emotion one time a day. Like, I'm feeling a little angry right now, and that's it. I'm just going to leave it at
Yep.
that. But just starting small. And the more you do that, the more you'll get comfortable with expressing yourself. And I know for me, for a long time, I kind of lost myself. I didn't know what it was that I wanted to do. And until I found that perfect thing, I couldn't do it. Like, it was like, until I know exactly what's going to make me happy, I'm not gonna try anything, and it was just like, I just had to start trying, and even though in that moment I was like, "Oh, this feels weird," or I didn't like that, it doesn't matter, the point is now I know I don't enjoy biking too much, so I'm not gonna do that again, but, like, I'll do it once in a while, but, like, not but I'm not gonna punish myself because I tried that, I'm gonna congratulate myself and be like, "Hey, you had enough courage to try that, what are you gonna try tomorrow?"
Yeah, and I think being more honest about your needs and reminding yourself that it's actually a gift to your marriage to bring more of you to your relationship, right? And I
Mhm.
think that's a big part of the problem with people pleasers is we've learned a long time ago that like I'm too much. I got to edit myself. I got to make other people happy. My needs are a burden. But actually, with a person who deeply loves you and cares about you, I think you want to accept that bringing more of yourself to the relationship is a real gift and it's what creates the magic of it all.
Exactly, because remember that when you fell in love, you were truly yourself. You fell in love with me as Kate, 20 some odd years ago,
Mhm.
and you don't know this version of Kate.
I keep falling in love with you.
You don't truly know me. So it's like what a gift it is for me to allow you to get to know, 30 some odd year old Kate.
So next week we're going to be doing the third dance in our four-part series. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to go deeper into this and you want some tools in those tough moments, you can go in the description below, grab our connection blueprint. This is a guide that helps you go, in those really tough moments, have some very specific skills to help you stay connected instead of kind of creating more distance in your marriage. And of course, if you want to talk to me directly, you can book a map call with me on my calendar. It's a 45-minute session where we just talk honestly about what's going on for you, the results you want to create, and whether or not I can help. So I look forward to seeing you next time. Cheers.
Bye.